Welcome to Talk with Tara, the podcast where we dive into the bold, the funny, and the fascinating. I'm Tara, your host, bringing you unfiltered conversations on life, love, and everything in between. Hit that follow button so you're always in the loop. And now let's get started. Christine, I am so excited to have you today. We have such a special guest. Christine Marie Mason is a 6-time founder and CEO, futurist healer, and a passionate advocate for women's wellness and liberation. She's the founder of Rosebud Woman, co-founder of a meditation center and the medicinal farm in Hawaii, and a frequent speaker on embodiment, entrepreneurship, and social change. She's featured on platforms like NPR, Vogue, and TEDx. Christine is the author of 9 books, including her latest, The 9 Lives of Women, a groundbreaking exploration of the sensual, sexual, and reproductive journey across the full arc of womanhood, from girlhood to elderhood. Blending science, history, and deeply personal stories, the book offers a fresh framework for embracing every stage of the female life cycle with reverence and power. Christine's a yogi, a tantrika, is that how I pronounce it, I hope? And grandmother. I can't believe you're a grandmother. She holds degrees from Northwestern. She has 4 children, and she's currently a PhD student at the Philosophy and Consciousness at CIIS. She splits her time between Mill Valley and Hawaii, and she's home to goats, chickens, and deep conversation. So welcome, Christine, to Talk with Tara.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So tell me, you're such a fascinating person. You've done so much in your life. And I just want to know, can you give us a little bit background of how you got to this journey and where you are today?
Well, you know how you're sort of born with a dharma? You're
Yes.
sort of born with your core makeup. I was never a person who was really into astrology or understanding any of that. But I do know that I came in with a pretty strong obsession with what was going on in between the spaces of what appeared to be going on. And I had quite a few mystical experiences as a child, a lot of connection with nature. And also grew up sort of bicultural. My mother was German and my father's American. We were going back and forth my whole childhood, moving a lot. We lived in France. We lived in Iran during the revolution.
So interesting
It
that you
was
lived
really,
in Iran.
really an important step in development to be at a very formative age and to be immersed in a beautiful but utterly foreign culture where they had the same values in terms of life and family and love and beauty, but utterly different understandings of God and economies and the role of women. And all of that was like in upheaval at that time. But I think as a young person being exposed to both the European and the American way of life, and then all of these other drop-ins, really opened me up to the possibility that there were a lot of ways to see a thing and to curiosity in general. And then my mom died when I was super young. She died when I was 11. And so I was sort of thrown to the wolves a bit on the ideas of what it meant to be a woman and a mother and a sexual being. And so I think a lot of confusion arose. And sometimes they say that you serve from your places of greatest confusion, so that it's not really an accident that I went into women's wellness and intimate health work. It's deeply tied to the things that happened to her and to that confusion at that formative time.
Oh, I'm sorry you lost your mom.
Unsettling, and also creates an empathy like for every child that has lost. We have this idea of this is the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
In the Ramayana, one of the blessings of the good king is to say, and no son shall die before his father. In the ideal kingdom, that's what we want. And so it feels out of nature's rhythm when it happens. And also when you lose someone young is the same. Like we have these ideas of the way things should be, but of course they're never that way. And then I want to just I'm kind of thinking about this idea of the mother. I just had a beautiful woman on our show, and she was talking about in indigenous societies, you have a lot of mothers. There are a lot of figures, grandmothers, aunties, mothers, who will step in if something happens to your biological mother. Yeah. And that's still really valid. If you know a child who's lost their parent, you have no idea how much you, as an auntie or a neighbor or an interested party, just stepping in and giving them some affirmative love makes a difference.
Yeah, it's same with fatherhood. I was listening to a fatherhood expert say the same thing, that the role of father doesn't have to be from father. It could be from many different role models and figures in your life. So the same goes for women as well, mother figure.
But then being raised by my dad, basically from that point on, I got a very strong sense of what it meant to be successful as a masculine. Mm-hmm. Like to be linear, know how to do money, know how to do economics, build things, be precise. There were a lot of blessings of having a primarily masculine raising me. So I think it puts me in a position of having a really unique blend of the feminine and the masculine in my life experience. And until he died in 2008, I primarily pursued leadership roles in business where I would get lots of good gold stars from my daddy.
Yeah. Yes.
I went for an MBA. I did all the right things. And I had some skill at that. And I had some success in that, but it wasn't feeding my womb.
How did you make that transition from being an entrepreneur, more on the corporate side, to more, on the spiritual side?
Yeah, I think when I was working, a lot of it was out of duty to provide for my family. And I really never thought of dharma or purpose in those early days. It was just like, get a good job, good title, good pay, show up every day, be a good girl. And then a couple of things happened around the same time. First of all, I was getting really disenchanted with the religion I was in, and I sort of was leaving that patriarchal overlay. And someone introduced me to yoga. A friend of mine, David Sabin, I saw him on the street and I'm like, you look phenomenal. What happened to you? He's like, yoga happened and you look terrible. And I'm going to pick you up on Friday and take you to yoga. And I remember getting in there and like when they started playing the drone sound for the Om, that it was like a recognition from thousands of years that this is where I was going. It just was immediate. New. Yeah. I don't think I missed a day after that. Wow. And that was 30 some years ago. Amazing. So that happened. And then someone invited me to go to a conference in California. Now everybody knows the TED conference, but in 2004, 2002, when he first told me about it, it was still offline, private gathering in Monterey. There was no TEDx. That didn't happen until 2009. And for the first time, I was in a room where person after person who was speaking was talking about what they're here to do to impact the world around them from their soul's purpose. People who were like deep in the lab, who were so curious about a specific topic that they would stay there all night just because they wanted to know. Right. And I'll tell you, in my little pod in the Midwest, that's not what I was seeing. I was seeing very careerist people, but not purpose-driven people. And that shifted completely once I entered that group. So there was that. And then in the same year, someone invited me to go to Burning Man, which is, for everybody knows now, but at that point, 20 some years ago, it was not a thing. And I showed up for the first time in an environment where no handbag, no car, no business card, no clothing. And who are you if there is no signifier of your status and you can just be yourself? And what I found was I was sensual and free and liked to sing and dance and ride my bike at sunrise. And if I was given the space, I had 4 kids by this point, so hard to find that space. Yep. But given the space and time, I knew then that this is the direction I would go, toward purpose-driven people who were embodied, who were living in the mystical, and who were enjoying their life in a really creative way. Plus, all the art out there was insane.
Right. I can imagine.
So that all converged in one year.
Yeah, it was you're meant to be. But, okay, for those who don't understand what Dharma is, can you explain it? And also purpose. So some people really get caught up on purpose. I have a friend, she's going through some very difficult health challenges and life challenges. And we went on a walk and she's just kind of getting in touch with spirituality. And she's like, I don't know what my purpose is. I need to find out my purpose. What's my purpose? Sometimes people are very clear on what their purpose is. And sometimes they're not, especially in midlife. Like we've been mothers, We've raised the kids. Maybe we are a single mom. Maybe we, are the breadwinner. We have these different roles that we play, but explain to our listeners, are they defective? Like people feel they're defective if they don't have a purpose, Yeah. So how do you know what your purpose is?
I'm going to backpedal a little bit on that and talk about tantric worldview.
Yeah.
Because unlike my upbringing was Christian, and a lot of that's about being a good person to get to the afterlife. Well, the tantric worldview is completely different. It says you're a fragment of the one light of divine source, and your entire job in a body is directly perceiving what's in front of you as you can, like touching everything, tasting everything, seeing everything, being in relationship as clearly as you can. And that your job as a yogi is to continue to clear the lens from the warping, the misperceptions, the projections, so you can be fully present. And that all you're here to do is to experience your own life as fully as you can and reflect it back to the one. because the only way creation knows itself is to live through you, a tree. And so what a relief. Like really the only purpose is to be in the full experience of your whole life, whether that's joy or sorrow or grief, is to fully be here. And to try not to get it all twisted up in like what your parents thought or your culture thought, but to see as directly as you can with a clean lens. And so the sense of like, I have to have a purpose to earn my right to be is no longer a question. Right. Then the question of purpose becomes, what is my natural desire pulling me toward? What are the questions and curiosities that light me up? What could I lose my sense of self doing? Where do my natural gifts shine? And then I keep following that thread. When I was raising the children, like my father's model was, I remember sitting once where he popped open his briefcase on his Friday to pay his bills, and he said something like, only 14 years to go. And I knew he was not in joy in his job. And I thought, like, how could you build an entire life waiting for your retirement and be miserable in this time? So I said that when I had children, I would try to switch that lens. Somebody needed to be like the next Donna Karan or whatever. And the practice my husband and I did was to take them to as many activities as we could and observe them closely so that when they lost their sense of self and got really immersed and got into that flow state, then to keep taking them back to those activities. Such that by the time they were 11, 12, 13, they were in a deep awareness of what their natural gifts and interests were. And to a one, that's what they did in their life. Like my daughter really? At 11 made her first dress. At 12, I remember having this conversation with her and she's like, well, I just want to make gorgeous gowns and make women feel beautiful. That's what I want to do. And she was the youngest professor ever at the Parsons School of Design and now has a ceremonial dress company. Like she found her gift early. So if you didn't have that, then you can find that in midlife. And also it's not a one-time deal. I've gone through probably 3 or 4 sets of changes and probably on another one about to begin of like, what is it now that's pulling me? So you might reparent yourself into that, like just exploration, no pressure, but where does my loving attention want to go?
Yeah.
And let the purpose arise from that.
And I think for our listeners, let's say you are in a corporate job and you have to pay the bills and you need health insurance. And I don't think that's bad, but because you have to do that to survive, but find things that light you up that are away from that, like on your weekends, right? Or after
maybe
work.
Your purpose has nothing to do with the what. Maybe your purpose is like, my job is to be the light of love and support, no matter where I go. If I'm checking out in the grocery store, if I'm at the dry cleaner, if I'm in a corporate job, like I met a bus driver at SFO and he's like radiating all the time. And he's on the same route. I travel a lot. And so one day I asked him, I go, you're the happiest bus driver I've ever met. And he goes, I'm not a bus driver. I am a missionary for Jesus Christ. Yeah. My job in this bus is to like spread the love of God. And I was like, okay, now I understand that it has nothing to do with what he's doing. And the reason he's beaming is because he's living from an utterly different purpose in the context of what appears to be a very simple role. You have the same thing like people who feed other people. Like, I want to spread yoga. You know what? I'm donating mats. I'm doing all these things. I could never make a living to support a family of my size as a yoga teacher.
Right.
I can do it in other ways, right?
Yeah.
So there's also like, not to confuse the Dharma with your job, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Because I
think people do get confused by that. They think, oh, I have this job and I don't love it. And what's my purpose? What am I doing this for? And sometimes you have to do that. You don't have a choice.
What if it's just to be happy and to be an effective and helpful member of your community? Like, we could go down this road for a long time.
Right.
Because now the thread is, why do you have to be great, Tara? Why do you have to be perfect and great and wonderful and a star? Because you live in a culture that celebrates this individual stardom, celebrity culture, when actually, like, most people live lives where they're nested in families they love or communities they love. And that's fine.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh, that's so fascinating. It's so amazing that you got to fulfill what you believe is your purpose. You're so blessed to be able to do that. Right. And really understand that.
Continuing to evolve it. And the life is a living document,
So you've written a number of books, but you most recently wrote The 9 Lives of Women. Tell us about what inspired you to write that book in particular.
Okay. So writing a book in general, like I didn't write anything until, I want to be clear, until all my children left home. So there was not space in my life to do this writing. And the first book that I wrote, the question I wanted to answer was, why do we feel we're separate when we're all connected? Like, what makes us feel separate? And so that book became Indivisible. I became curious about, like, how do you sacralize the world? So I wrote Reverence. Then I wanted to know, like, what are the ways, the neurobiological ways that we could take care of ourselves without medicine, without pathologizing the normal experiences of being human. So I wrote The 9 Gifts. So each book that has been the result of my own curiosity. So with this one, The 9 Lives of Women, I started this intimate care company, I guess 7 years ago now. And it was the first holistic intimate wellness, vulva, vaginal care. I started it because I was entering menopause and everything was like chemi. And so I made these really beautiful, informed by Ayurveda, informed by Chinese medicine products. And then as I went to name them, I started getting activated in a sort of a neo-feminist way, because I had no idea. I was living in some sort of a bubble about the lack of education that people had around their body, around the shame they had around sexuality and all of that stuff. And so the mission of the company started to become the products as a delivery vehicle for messages around no shame, loving yourself through all your life stages, educating around sexuality, sexual health, women's health, reproductive health. And so over the years, I got to really, through letters from women and going to conferences and going to trade shows and all that stuff, to really get into these dialogues and women's circles around what they struggle with. And there were so many things. Like the first one was not knowing what was coming in the next stage of their life and utterly being shocked. Like, I'm shocked that I'm in perimenopause. I'm shocked that I'm in menopause. I am shocked by what happens during pregnancy. I'm shocked when my first period comes. I'm shocked by intercourse. Like what? I had done a survey with our customers about one of the questions was, who do you talk to about sex and who's the easiest and hardest? And in every single age group, because we divided them by boomer 1, boomer 2, blah, blah, all the way down to, new people, young people. It was the hardest person to talk to was your mom. Like a 1.2 to 1.6 on a scale of 1 to 5, hard to easy. And I was like, well, if the transmission isn't occurring between you and your mother, then where is it occurring? So I started publishing questions, like 100 questions to ask your mom about her sex life or about her birth. And like really see what's alive in your family system. And women would say, I could never talk to my mom about those things. I was like, well, please start. So all of that sitting in the background. And then I was looking at the women who were older than me. I'm 60. I'm 59. I'll be 60. At 70, who were super vibrant, still doing stuff, climbing, mountain biking. At 80, who were still writing, painting, creating. I was thinking about my own life. Things didn't even really take off for me until 52 in a lot of ways. Until my children were out of the house, I went through this totally amazing renaissance. I looked at all my friends who were doing that. But the stories in the media were still about like sorrow and lame. It's like, this is the lame and difficult part of your life. I'm like, okay, your hormones are changing, but actually what you have in this period of life is generally a little more money. You already know what you're good at, self-knowledge. You've probably done your childbearing and clarity on what you value in a way that you didn't when you were younger. So if you have all of that, it's a perfect suit for big creation. So I started calling postmenopause the free period, and that got a lot of pickup. And then I looked at like, okay, all the research is made in matron crone, which is defining a woman by whether she's able to have a baby but hasn't yet, has had a baby and still can have more, can't have a baby anymore. Literally all of it in reference to your reproductive capacity. And I was like, that's so limiting. And it also doesn't give you any understanding of the stages post-menopause. It was like you stop your bleeding and then that's it. It's like a flat line from that point out, when there are actual very distinct biomarker stages at 65, at 78, that create new entire phases. But all of that research had yet to be done. So I was like, this is very ambitious, but I want to create a whole new map of what your sexual, sensual, and reproductive life is in a woman's cyclical body from birth to 100. Kind of get it approximate at the ages, but definitely at the biomarker stages. Put as much science as I can in there, interview women, do stories, and then present that as a model for understanding what it's like to be governed by this cyclical, cyclical nested cycles embodiment. And I started writing. It took me 3 years to write it. So I was writing before chat. Now, so, it was really exciting to see it like come to fruition and get out there. So it got picked up as the Kirkus Indie Book of the Month for August, for
Oh,
next month.
wow.
This month, I guess.
Congratulations.
And so it seems to be hitting a note.
So
Okay,
when
that
you
was a really
write,
long run on the book, but that's why.
that's great. So when you write, does it flow from you, or do you have to have a discipline every day? Do you have to say, like, I'm going to sit down
I
from this
am
time
a
to,
creature of habit. I write every morning for 2 hours.
okay. And whether do you sometimes write and you're like, I don't like what I wrote and you just scrap it,
I
or
hate what I
what's your
write when I write
process?
it. Okay, look, like if you, okay. So, and often I'll find that what's coming out verbally is richer
Uh-huh.
than if I sit down to write. But the discipline of sitting down for 2 hours early in the morning, like I do my morning practice and I have my nutrition and then I write and try not to get interrupted in that time frame. And I write a lot because I write the newsletter for Rosebud, I write a Substack, I write a newsletter for Radiant Farms, I write a newsletter for the farm, and
Wow.
I'm always writing a book. So
Yeah.
like it's my main work.
Uh-huh.
And I get as much in as I can. If I'm starting a new project, like I've got a new book I'm beginning, I do the deepest outline that I can. I get my basic research and basic information in there. And then I go through it very methodically through the outline and build each section of the outline out one day at a time, a couple hours a day
Oh,
until it's done.
wow. Very disciplined person. Do you think that comes from, do you think being raised by your dad and having that masculine energy has helped you become a business person and more disciplined? Like, I feel like all of that you're just such a blend of both. Like you said at the beginning of our discussion, the fact that you've been an entrepreneur and you've had these businesses and you've been able to like scale these businesses at the same time, like really get into your feminine side. I think that's just really amazing. How do you do that? How do you balance so well?
I'm the aspect of the feminine that receives and rests and is magnetic took a long time to cultivate. Like I would say only in the last 5 years. But the aspect of the feminine that listens and is webbed and intuitive and has a lot of girlfriends and like, like that lateral thing, which is really a great brain structure for a writer,
Mm-hmm.
that has always been there. But the aspect of the feminine that's just like rests and waits for things to arrive at her, that is not in my chart, whatever that means.
How are you in your romantic relationship? Are you a receiver or are you
Subby
a
is
doer?
subby.
You are, yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm always like co-leading on the household. Like
Right.
I'm a really good wifey wife. I love I love like being the supporter in that way. But because I'm leading in so many other areas, I really like the strong masculine in my personal life.
So
It would be exhausting otherwise.
can you give some women advice on leaning into their feminine? Because I think what's happened to women who are in corporate America or, really strong in the household, they end up and then they get divorced and then they go out there. Because I meet a lot of single women. I give a lot of advice to women, friends. I have this kind of knack. And women tend to lean in their masculine when they're in their second chapter of meeting a new partner. How did you lean into your feminine? Maybe some advice for our listeners and how to be more feminine and receive.
Really interesting question. So I'm like dropping into how that feels. And it's interesting that the first thought was a lens of love, that the inner work on not being afraid, like not being afraid to trust, not being afraid to trust the earth or the divine or the everything in my life is happening as a benefit for my soul's unfoldment, that there's something about seeing through the lens of unconditional love that is fundamentally soft. And if I walk around defended or afraid or like you're going to hurt me or I can't count on anybody, maybe you can't count on anybody except yourself. But if you're coming in with that lens, you're already shutting down your love.
Yeah.
And the problem with shutting down your love is it doesn't just shut down your ability to give it, it shuts down your ability to receive it. And so like a lot of that seems to be coupled with judgment, making other people wrong or having them in your expectation field. You should behave this way, or this is the kind of man I'm looking for. Here's my 30 items.
Right. Right.
What if that's not it? What if it's actually like all I'm doing out in the world is when I meet someone is trying to drop into full presence and to feel them, feeling me, feeling them, and then to see what's really alive there. And what ends up happening is I make a lot of great friends, guys and women, and it's quickly apparent whether someone can be present with themselves enough to stay present with me. And if they can't, then they're not my person. If it's all this transactional stuff. So I think the softening is first like a softening into your own receptivity to the world and not wanting the world to be a certain way for me to be comfortable.
It sounds a lot like non-attachment, not being attached to an outcome.
Yeah, and maybe non-attachment, that's a yogic concept, a parigraha. I'm not attached. It's like but it has a quality of disconnection from life versus like wonder, reverence, awe. Wow, what is the world presenting me with this person? Who is this person? Like it's not even that I have to be attached or non-attached. I just have to stay in wonder.
Yeah.
You know? It's a pretty amazing world. And there are a lot of great people that are amazing to meet that are not for me romantically, but that are for like part of the quilt of creation. And there's something about not needing it to go a certain way that seems to open up the field for it to go the right way. So there's that. Then the next thing I would say is, I would say about 30% of the women in midlife, by the time you get to midlife, between the navel and the bottom of the pussy is shut down, mid-thigh. And it can be from early sexual trauma. It can be from childbirth. It can be from not getting enough juice or movement. It can just simply be from like not dancing enough or not getting enough touch. And there is such a power and potency and wisdom in that part of the body. When I was early on in the journey of reconnecting with my genitals, someone said, your pussy is an oracle. And that if you want to know the answer to something, you can ask your mind, you can ask your heart, or you can ask your womb and your pussy and see what happens. And you'll get a different answer. But the one you can trust is your reproductive organs, because that's the part that says, is this a safe situation? Is this an attractive situation? And so tune into that. That meant you had to feel that part of your body. And if you're sitting all day, that's difficult.
Right.
So some practices, like we're a little bit on video here, but we're not really on video. But like getting a lot more movement into the hip space. Like I do the hip circles, what's called Sufi grinds, like moving the whole spine every day as part of my warm-ups, a lot of breath work. Like really trying to drop in and feel pelvic pulses, feel it. And then, self-touch for your own pleasure. Like I make that balm and it's outer labia, inner labia, all the inner parts and the whole pelvic basin to bring blood flow in. Like for women in midlife, not having blood flow is part of the reason it's taking you so long to get aroused if you're not getting aroused at all. That squats, moving the hips, doing self-massage, bringing attention, slowing down and breathing with yourself. These are all ways to wake that part up. You can also work with people who do that professionally, not just pelvic floor therapists, but like sexual tantra practitioners. Like I want to distinguish between classical philosophical tantra, which I teach, and neo-tantra, which is much more sexual. But the people who are healing in that area, like you go to a massage therapist to work on your shoulder, but because we've made the pelvic basin so taboo, you have to find these dakas and dakinis who will come in and you probably have attachment points inside the vaginal wall that are like incredibly wounded and contorted from childbirth or the psoas muscle being out of place or whatever. And they will release those. And what you find in that is like, not only are they releasing the physical holding, but all of the, like that thing that happened when you were 14 with it. So becoming receptive overall.
Well, that could be good for women there. I know there's women who have never had an orgasm before. So something like that could be good for a woman who has never had an orgasm.
Yeah. I mean, if you haven't looked at the actual medical diagram, the scientific diagram of the clitoris, and what it actually looks like, I think most people have seen it by this point. But if you haven't, these big bulbs that go behind the labia and these legs that are highly innervated. And so that, and then the little bulb is just like the teeny, teeny tip that comes out is a tiny portion of it. And the root of it goes into the back of the vaginal canal, that is called the G-spot. So the root of the clitoris is actually the tip of the G-spot. And this whole organ system is like right in there.
Yeah.
And and the angle and the patience. Most women say their biggest blocks to sexual joy are they can't relax, or they have body shame, or they're mad.
Right.
So yes. A lot of it is like, get pink light bulbs, make the temperature right in the room, turn the music into a certain frequency, get that heart frequency going, and then allow the time to warm up and play. like with play with angles and go slow until you, like, the other thing is some women have so little sensation that they need to have extreme sensation in order to feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't make a lot of availability for a good orgasm. So go slow.
Yeah,
And
go slow, take time.
yeah, and that might mean like asking your partner. I'll tell you, all the men that I've ever spoken with on this subject, they want to bring their wife's pleasure or their
Yeah.
girlfriend's pleasure so badly. They buy all those books. They
Yeah.
listen to podcasts.
Uh-huh.
But, it really only shows up in what's almost like a workshoppy intimacy session. Would you be
Yeah.
willing to workshop orgasm with me? Like just lighter, harder, left, right, up, down, like narrate it the whole time. If you got a partner who's willing to play with you in a lab, how exciting.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
It could be fun.
Yeah, definitely.
And probably more effective than like putting on a costume.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. One of the things you mentioned is about friendship. And I'm wondering if you're going to write a book on friendship, because loneliness has become such an epidemic in our society, especially with social media and people just feeling like they look at people's lives in this really fake lens, and they see all these people having fun with that, you don't even know if it's realistic.
Yeah.
And people end up feeling very lonely and isolated, and women in midlife find it more difficult to make really good friends. So they've had their mom friends that have not been chosen for them. They become friends because their kids were friends, or they met them at the PTA or whatever the reason. So that happened to me. Like, I moved to a town where the people didn't really feel like my tribe of people.
Yeah.
But I became friends with these people because they were my kids' friends, and it just worked out that way. And then when I decided to separate from my marriage, I started to meet completely different people. I opened up. Yeah. That was one of my things that I wanted to manifest. So I really focused on what would my friendships look like? What would they be like? And I think it's hard for women to find their tribe. You seem like you're really good at doing that. Do you address that in your book? And how do you do that?
There are some snippets in there, particularly for older women. Mm-hmm. In the book. And I just want to say that this idea that you were having friendships of sort of circumstance, mm-hmm. and not values-based friendships, or friendships that were social friendships because, right. We have to have somebody over for the barbecue or whatever. That's so common. But then something bad will happen in your life, and you'll see who actually shows up. And you realize that the friendships that really matter are the ones that are values-driven, where you have genuine love and care for each other's success. Mm-hmm. And so my filter now is are you able to be authentic and real and present? Are you a person who uplifts other people? Mm-hmm. Are you trying to grow? And because that is self-selecting, the women who are in my circles now and who have been kind enough to invite me into theirs are they blow my mind every day. And the other thing I will say is it takes effort in the way a side gig takes mm-hmm. effort to be a good friend. Mm-hmm. To yes. show up for birthdays, to take the time to write a note, to bring flowers. And, not having a mom, I didn't know any of those girl codes. And I've had a couple of women who've modeled that. This woman, Kathy Joy, who's turned out to be this amazing friend. She came over and she's I came over, but I brought art supplies so we can make paintings while we talk. And I was who are you? This is my child self is so joyful. But every time I learn how healthy women do it, I port that into the way that I treat others. So instead of sitting home feeling lonely and victim-y, I do a lot of outreach, make a lot of stuff happen. Yesterday I had a yoga practice and a brunch at the house, and a bunch of people came, and could have not have happened, could have gone to class in town, but what would that have been? What would that have done?
Okay, so that's really good advice. So the advice is make things happen. So you don't have to go to the gym. You can have your girlfriends over and have a vision board day. Totally. I did that for New Year's Eve once. The day after New Year's, I invite all my girlfriends and we vision board.
Do you remember that book from the 90s or whatever, Never Eat Lunch Alone? It was a man's networking book. But it's actually for friendship, as far as friendship goes, I have to walk every day. I get my steps in, unless I'm really working through something that I have to be alone during that walk, and I'm got to connect with the trees.
Right.
Why walk alone?
Yeah. Take initiative.
And people are, when you're walking and talking, the dynamic of the conversation is so much more active.
That's so therapeutic, walking with a girlfriend. And I mean, I do that that was like my COVID saving grace.
Yeah.
Every day I walked like twice a day with different people. It was so
This
social.
week, here's some things that are going on this week that have nothing to do with work. I'm going to go paddleboarding with a friend at her house. I'm going to drive to the springs out at Mount Tam to collect spring water for our jugs with another friend. Like, they're just normal. I'm doing my normal things, but we're doing it together. And in that way, we get caught up on our life. The other thing I will say is that because my interest so much is in spirituality, meditation, living into the fullness of your life, once you get into those communities, the women and the men are phenomenal. The men don't want to get in your pants, and the women don't want anything from you. There's no social climbing. You're literally doing it out of your love of life and your love of expansion and devotion. So there's also that.
You've certainly found your tribe. It sounds you're a very inspiring person.
I have a tribe for my exercise, and I have a tribe for my spiritual life.
I love that.
And a little bit for business, although that's getting less and less, I have to say.
So tell me more about your book, More the Midlife. I remember we were talking and you were just saying, you just said it about 10 minutes ago as well, that after your 50s, it's your time to really bloom. Can you talk a little bit more about that and advise some of the women, like how do they bloom in midlife, like some ways to do that? Because you were saying you're empty nest now and the world is your oyster. I remember my dad was like, the world is your oyster. You can do anything you want now that you're an empty nester.
That's how, yes.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. Putting it in context, like, wasn't that long ago when you would have your last period, you'd become a grandmother, you'd pass on your knowledge and support your daughter in having her children, and then you'd die. I think the average age of death was 66 when they set the retirement age at 65 for men. Work, die. And now you have 20 or 30 years from your point of your last period, 40 in some cases, right? So your whole second half of life is in this period-free context, this reproductive-free context. Number one, you have to stay vital in that era. The idea that you're in a slow decline from now until death, and like 70 to 90 is going to be sort of unenergized and slow and boring, like that's no longer the case. I'm a big fan of using bioidentical hormones, peptides, all of that stuff to support your full life. Though when you lose estrogen, you lose joint function, you use mental acuity. There's all kinds of things roles it plays in the whole body. So prepare yourself physically to live a long and vital life. I've seen these amazing photographs of women who are running marathons and skiing late into their 80s and enjoying it completely. Like their skin is sagging, but their muscles and joints are totally intact. And so to decolonize from yourself all the ideas of aging that you've heard, and to go look for evidence to the contrary, and to set yourself up physically for a long, vibrant, healthy life. That means for some people making new choices. If you haven't learned that already, obviously you're a very fit and healthy person, but there's a lot of women who by the time you've gotten to 50, you're sort of like, you've let weight accumulate in a way that's not healthy for your body.
Right.
With no body type bias there, just like not healthy for your body. You might be losing muscle tone, and like putting that first. So as long as your health stack, and then to a certain extent your money stack, like one thing I learned is I don't want to work as much as I was working. And I still really like spending money. And how do I adjust the way that I live and spend so that I can be in abundance and beauty, but have the spaciousness to explore new things? So there are a lot of women who are now well off in their mid-50s, but there are also a lot who've gone through divorce. There are more women that are in poverty in their 50s than there are men in poverty in their 50s. And so then to get the stack of your money life a little bit more in tune. And then with that in context, do the desire mapping. What do you really deeply desire? What, if you didn't do it before you died, would be the thing that you would regret? And you just begin going for that. All of those things, like you wanted to make art, you wanted to make music, I have a friend, Tessa Crone, she wanted to be polyamorous. So after their kids left home, her and her husband opened up their marriage, and she even has a podcast on that, open nesting or something.
Which, by the way, I just listened to a podcast with an expert woman on fatherhood, and she was saying polyamorous relationships are actually the norm and monogamy is not the norm. I mean, it's a construct. So
Right.
that's interesting. Anyway,
People
as
call
I
it cheating,
digress.
but it's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So like anything that you wanted to experiment with, just do it.
Right.
Now, I will say, I just had a friend over and she's really struggling with weight gain from menopause. The idea that she's not hot. She doesn't go to a party.
Okay.
And,
yes.
and like all the men
I'm glad
used to
you're bringing
ogle
this
her
up.
and now
Yes.
they're not ogling her.
Yeah.
And she doesn't like it. I'm
Yes.
like, well, guess what? That's the way that is. And so
Yeah.
now
How do you handle that though? It's so hard.
Like go through the grief process. Go through the grief.
There is a grieving process too.
Particularly like you're beautiful.
Thank you.
Like what it was like to be a young, beautiful woman where somebody would look at you across the room and go, I want to have that. You know that. Yeah. And so you've experienced that. Great. There are some other women who are experiencing that now. Now you're experiencing something else, which is like connections at a different level. Yeah. You can still be I saw someone do this really funny bit where he's like, you're going to be old even if you start injecting your face. You might be hot. Everybody will still know you're old.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, that's clear. Like being hot, being desirable is a body energy. It's like you're lit up from the inside and that makes you fun to be around. And your guys are getting older also. Right. There are a few that are in Peter Pan and they only want to date women in their 20s and 30s. And well, have at it. Like have a conversation with someone who's 30 years younger than you every single morning and tell me how you're feeling in a year. But, I think that we have to grieve it and then move on. Like if you get hung up on it, it's like, this is it.
It's hard not to get hung up. You bring up a very good point that my girlfriends and I were talking about. Is it easier to be, this is so politically incorrect, but is it easier to be unattractive for your whole life and get older? Or is it harder to be a very beautiful woman when you were younger and then become an older woman?
It depends on if you, as a very beautiful younger woman, developed any other understanding of your identity.
Yeah, that's
true. Like, who are you? You're wearing a beautiful meat suit. How fun was that trip? And now your beautiful meat suit is falling off the bone and you're still the radiant essence of your soul that you were when you were born. And now go have fun, play. And, you might not get the same yacht party invitations. Who knows?
Yeah.
So you don't. So you go somewhere else. Like you go where you're wanted, right?
Exactly.
And I just feel like I had a moment. I was on the beach and sitting on a bench on the beach in Los Angeles. And this young girl is rollerblading by. And she's wearing spangle glitter booty shorts. She's braless with like a little tiny tank top. Midriff showing, perfect skin, perfect tan. She got her headphones on. She's doing this. She's skating. And I looked at her and I was like, I remember that feeling. That is one of the best feelings in the world. And she is another me. And I'm like living through her in that moment, but I don't have to do that again.
Yeah.
Because this body had 4 children. It's got its own stories at this point. And it's like right now, it's like, how people notch their belts? Like that's how I think of like the marks on my body. Like I'm notching my belt with all kinds of activities of being human. I haven't gotten a tattoo, but if I did, it would probably be something that would indicate that. So we grieve it. We consciously step into the second half of our lives or the last third of the life and claim all the wisdom. Say, here are the things that are probably over or they're over in the way they used to be. Here are the things that are opening. And I'm consciously stepping into that. Yeah. But the piece of like being I'm a victim of time.
Yeah.
And I'm a victim of, see, if you were living in the olden days, you'd be the lady of the manor and you would get the automatic respect of the matriarch and the chatelaine or whatever. And so because we've infantilized the feminine and like what's valued in so many ways, that's not so obvious in the public sphere, but in your private sphere, you see the women you respect and love who are older than you and who excite you. Don't believe those stories.
Yes, exactly. I agree. Don't believe the stories.
My kids adore me. Yes. And I adore them. To be the matriarch of that family is like amazing. And the men that are my own age, like we're still granted, we probably still see each other through the lens of meeting at 30 or 40. But the men who are my own age were like hot and 60. We like it. I like them. They still think they're fucking hot.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
And so like what, and the game of like, am I wanted? Do you want me? Like that kind of game, we can still play in that space, but it's no longer the marker of my mission on my value as a person is no longer defined by whether that's because I'm wanted by me and I'm wanted by spirit and I'm doing really good work in the world. and I find the world pretty magical. So you can play with me and I would love it, but if I'm not for you, I'm not for you. It's not going to harm my inner life.
What about your friend who, I mean, you did discuss peptides. You just mentioned
Yeah.
peptides. Can you tell us a little bit more about peptides?
Yeah, I met a man, a physician in Encinitas, Martin Polanco, and he introduced me. He's an integrative medicine physician, and he said, listen, peptide science for women and men who are hitting their 50s, particularly women, is really vital if you're going to live a long life. So BPC 157, GHKCU are for skin, bones, health. I mean, my skin is like unbelievably different since I started taking those. And then
Your skin looks beautiful.
yeah, it's night and day.
Mm-hmm.
It's night and day. Joints, that also works for joints. Otzi for metabolism, ipamorelin for muscle formation. And so he gave me a list of things to start trying and like what schedule to go on. NAD plus, which is another, you can do it intravenously and like go for an IV. You can do it in an injection. You can take it orally. And he said, these are the things that have a lot of data against them. Try it and see how it works. And so I started on a protocol about 3 years ago, and I go for like 2 months on, 1 month off. And it seems to be really helping.
Wow. So do you get the peptide, I don't know what you call it, prescription from an integrative doctor or, okay, or for your natural path as well?
I don't see a person. I don't see a naturopath, so I don't know. He's an integrative medicine specialist. They are approved for research purposes in the U.S.
Okay.
The FDA is being a little squirrely. Like they outlawed some of them, and then within a week, a big pharma company came out with a mimic that they approved.
Okay.
Because they're cheap.
Right.
By themselves, if they're not coming out under a pharmaceutical brand name, they're relatively inexpensive.
Okay, that's interesting.
And so the minute a pharma company puts their brand on it, makes it go through medical channels, has so many other people in the value chain that need to be compensated, then it gets out of everyone's price point. So you kind of have to go underground to find a lot of the right information unless you have a doctor who's willing to tell you.
Okay, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. So as we wrap up, you are such a fascinating human being. So feel so blessed that I got to interview you. Can you tell us, I noticed you have this workshop that's coming up on your website. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Looks really interesting.
Twice a year, I run a 6-week course called Living Tantra, and it's classical Tantra. And I really feel that little snippet that we were talking about in the beginning about what the Tantric worldview is such an invitation to live fully. And I wanted to dispel some myths about Tantra as a purely sexual practice. So I start out by really spending the first week doing that, and then move into talking about Neo-Tantra and how when Tantra came west, it became sexualized and why it entered our cultural fractal that way, and then sacred sexuality and other traditions. And so my hope with that combination is to restore attunement, pleasure, desire, the fullness of your experience in a human body to the sacred. And we do it I'm leading people through practicum. So there is movement, there is mudra, or the way we touch our fingers, there is breath work as a warm-up. We treat it as a very social container. So everybody comes and shares with one another also. So there's some pedagogy and then some interaction, a lot of reading. People get very stressed out about the reading. And I'm like, read what you can. I give them a reading packet. I give them books, podcasts, episodes, so that they can go as deep as they want in any area. And then in the 4th week, we do a detox to refine our own energy bodies. We learn about like how energy moves in the system from different systems, maps of energy, how what you consume in media, your food, the way you interact with people, how that impacts your ability to perceive clearly. So we do a week of detox and cleanse. And then the next week we do attunement and relational practices. So now that you're clean and perceiving better, how do you interact differently with your partner, with your friend, with your child? What are some ways to engage that? And then the last week is what would it mean to live this way all the time, and to incorporate that into your daily life, what kind of has to unwind. The people who take the class, 2 of them came yesterday morning for my little yoga thing. Like they got pregnant after the class. She quit her job after the class. They credited it all with that. But she also told me that she's still meeting once a week with 3 of the other women from that class to do practices in the morning. Yeah. So they build really strong relationships also. And then we do once a year an in-person retreat for anybody who's taken the class. We can get together and actually like do it. Last year it was in Boone, North Carolina, in Asheville. That was super fun. So this is like moving in between my regular life, but it's the most joy I have, the most. Because at some point, the liberatory technologies that you receive from others, to pass them on is the biggest joy. Yeah. So yeah, that's the class. Come take the class.
Please tell people how to find you on your website and also how to buy the book.
Okay. ChristineMarieMason.com is I use my full name everywhere now because it's easiest. And then my company is Rosebud Woman, rosewoman.com. And the book is for sale there. It's for sale in digital on Amazon also. And also all the intimate care products, moisturizers for the vulva and the vagina, arousal serums, body oils. And everything we make is organic, ethically sourced and formulated and made in LA. So, good stuff.
Local.
We have about 100,000 women who are in our customer base now. And I would say about 50,000 are in the conversation on a weekly basis through emails and other things on how to live fully into your embodied life with joy.
Oh, I love
Anyway,
that.
The only other thing I want to say is I covered a lot on the second half of life in the book. But my real hope with the book is that women will read it who are about to have a child, who are going through their first sexual experience, it's a great book to give to someone who's going on their first period, because, and it's my dream would be you have 6 or 7 women and you want to read it as a group and they're from multiple generations and you're having all these conversations together. Yeah. And then adding your own stories to the chapters as we go. That would be my dream. So if you want to do a book club, I can send you like a whole book club setup and take it out and talk to each other about these subjects.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Christine. This has been such a pleasure.
I have fun.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Talk with Tara. If you loved today's episode, please follow the show and share it with a friend. Stay tuned. There's so much more to talk about. See you next time.